This is now the third time that the executive branch of the federal government has announced to the world that we rig all markets.
The land of Arcadia.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And today we have the first part of an interview I did with Rory Hall of the Daily Coin, where we dig into something rather stunning that happened last week, where it sure appears as if, once again, the government, this time Trump, the CFTC, and some of our regulators, a bunch of former Goldman Sachs executives have basically acknowledged that they're playing God in the market. Some stunning things going on here. So I was grateful to have Rory, who runs this site, the Daily Coin, a great site of information for anyone. You know, if you like the show, you'd like Rory's site here. So with that said, hit the subscribe button and here we go. So I'm here with my friend Rory Hall of the Daily Coin, who runs a site that, as I was thinking about it, getting ready to do our interview today, Rory, you probably have more exposure to all the different gold sources of news that you post, and of course the folks that you bring onto your show and you put up with talking to silver junkies like myself. So it's great to have you on here. I know you're now a preferred Kitco interviewing guest, so great to catch up with you and talk about some of the fascinating things going on in the gold and silver world. And how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well, and I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate all the good work that you do, Chris. I think that you are one of the underrated heroes out there of the gold and silver market. I think that the work that you do is very important, and the book that you've been working on I'm really looking forward to that being published, because I think that that's going to be a real eye-opener for a lot of people. So I appreciate you having me on today.
Well, that's certainly incredibly kind of you to say, and I guess I don't have to tell the audience of the kind of man you are, the kind things you've said. And even when we first met, I had noticed you had been republishing some articles I wrote, and it was just incredibly supportive, and been a pleasure getting to know you over the year. And perhaps to dig in for folks who are saying, all right, enough with the love fest, give me some gold and silver news. I'm glad that it's you that I have on here today, because I've been a little bit steaming since I first read this last Thursday, and would love to get your comments on it, because especially I know you're not the biggest Bitcoin fan, although a story that ties into gold and silver, because last week, the Trump here's an article from CoinDesk that says the Trump administration acted to deflate the Bitcoin bubble of 2017 by allowing the introduction of futures products. And we have a quote from Chris Giancarlo, who was with the CFTC, says, one of the untold stories of the past few years is that the CFTC, the Treasury, the SEC, and the National Economic Council director at the time, who was Gary Cohn, believed that the launch of Bitcoin futures would have the impact of popping the Bitcoin bubble, and it worked. So the question to you, sir, regardless of what someone feels, or let's say Bitcoin is or isn't a bubble, is this not public confirmation that Trump, the president, and Goldman Sachs are deciding which markets should go up or down?
Absolutely. I mean, this is now the third time that the executive branch of the federal government has announced to the world that we rig all markets. The first time that they did it was in the 1970s. I think it was around 73 or 74, whenever the gold and silver futures market was launched. They did it in a much more subtle manner, but the end result was the same. And the gold and silver futures market was put into place for the specific purpose of rigging the market to keep people away and uninterested in gold. It might have been in the 80s. I can't remember when, but whenever that market whenever the CFTC launched the futures gold and silver contracts, their specific purpose was for reining in interest on gold in particular, and to keep the price under control, to keep people away from it. And then during the Reagan administration, the President's Working Group on Markets, more affectionately known as the Plunge Protection Team, was put into place for the specific purpose of rigging the equities market, the Dow Jones, in order to keep the market moving in the desired range. Can go up all at once, but going down, well, now that's a different story. And the gold and silver market, it's the exact opposite. Gold and silver, they can go down all they want, but they can only go up, well, they can only go up by what we determine that they can go up by. Bitcoin sounds like it's the same thing. And more than likely, it's going to be treated in the same manner as gold and silver. And if there's any other cryptocurrency that rises, that breaks away from the pack and sticks its head up above out of the herd, then it will be treated exactly the same way. And now that they already have the tools in place, the script, if you will, the program, all they have to do is plug in, ABC coin or XYZ coin or whatever it is that pops its head up and starts challenging the status quo. And I've long said that these cryptocurrencies and blockchain, they're very dangerous. And people have, they say, when Bitcoin was first really getting recognized back in 2014, 2015, people were saying, yeah, it's going to save us from the banksters. It's going to keep us away from those criminal bankers. And it's like, well, okay, whatever. They're the ones that developed the whole thing. It's their product. So it's, cryptographic technology was developed by MIT, or it was developed in the basement of MIT with the NSA's assistance. So when you have something that's born from evil, odds are it's going to remain as it was intended. And that's not to do something for the people. So I'm not surprised at all at the statements by the CFTC, the Trump administration, the Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin. None of it surprises me at all. It's what I wrote extensively about back in 2017 when I wrote a series of more than 15 different articles dispelling the whole Bitcoin cryptocurrency nonsense, because that's all that it is. If you think about cryptocurrency, there's not one single cryptocurrency that has its own value, period. It has no intrinsic value whatsoever. It's merely a digital face of a fiat currency. Think about that for a minute. Let that sink in for a minute. This is a digital face of a fiat currency. So this is an illusion of an illusion. And it's like, how can that be something positive? So there's nothing there. You start with nothing and then you work your way backwards from there. And that's how I see it. So as far as what the CFTC, them developing or announcing to the world, of course that's what it was for. So
Well, again, one of the things I also found interesting, though, is that they mentioned that in terms of popping the bubble, they used futures contracts. And I just thought it was interesting. Well, how did you know that using a futures contract would bring the price of something lower? It's funny. I remember when that contract first came out, because shortly after that, I'm like, you turned it into the silver market essentially overnight. But what's slipping in there is that they're confirming, all right, we're using a futures contract to make a price lower. How do they know that worked? And again, that's what we've seen for decades. which you touched on a little bit, but I'll let you comment again. That's what we've seen in gold and silver. And here it is, Goldman Sachs and the president telling you straight out that, I mean, how else did they know it?
because it had worked so well in the gold and silver market. I mean, look at what they did. You know, if you use and I love this because it's their own information, it's their own rigged numbers. If you go to the Federal Reserve Bank's Minneapolis website, there's an inflation calculator right there on the homepage. If you use the 1980 high for gold of, I use $800 and use $1980 and then ask and then have the Federal Reserve with their own rigged information tell you what that $800 should be today. And it's almost $2,500. Okay. So gold is nowhere near $2,500. So we know that by their own account that gold is rigged by 2/3 of what they even say that it should be, or by not 2/3, but by close to about 60%. Silver, it's far worse. Okay. Silver is bouncing around around $18, $17.75, $18. They have some love-hate affair with the $18 mark on silver. It's like 1,500 on gold. It's like, but anyway, if you plug in the $49 high, which is what I use for 1980, and the silver price, what you will see is $152. So almost 10 times, it's about 80%, 85% of what it should be by their own rigged information. This is their own information. So where would Bitcoin be? I'd heard somebody in the ether, it was floating through something that I'd heard or read, but there's only like 3 million Bitcoin left at this point. And we know that there are several million that are missing of the 21 million. They're gone. They're just gone forever. And I've heard numbers estimating that it could be as few as 15 or 16 million Bitcoin. So if you've got something that's that limited, that's that in demand, and people kind of move around with it, where would it be at right now? And once again, I loathe Bitcoin, absolutely, but I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want to see it rigged any more than I want to see anything else rigged. I don't like lies, and that's a lie. You know, will Bitcoin ever see $100,000 or $1 million as have people called for? No, because they won't allow it, period. So it's that's the whole point of this futures contract. And it started out with looking at the gold and silver contract. There's your proof right there. I mean, all you have to do is use their own calculator and generate their own rigged information, and you can see just how horrible the rigging actually is. You can see it with your own eyes. You don't have to take my word for it. So
No, I don't. And in fact, it's funny, as the years go by, I joined Wall Street in 2001, left in 2012. And there's somewhere in there, the things accelerated in the degree of crumbling of integrity. And that's why I left. So I everything you're saying, again, I have a little more optimistic view on some of the cryptos, but that's why I appreciate discussing this with you, because here it's someone that you're not saying you love Bitcoin or you want to eat it for breakfast, but still just the degree that let the market decide, not
right.
this government that tells us what to do. Because I found a lot of the comments in this article really disingenuous, in that sense that, again, hey, if someone likes an asset, whether it's Bitcoin, silver, but let them decide versus this intervention. because here's another quote. I'm stacking the deck here to get you a little riled up today, but some of the things they said here. Giancarlo, again, this was the guy from the CFTC, elaborated further saying Bitcoin's dramatic price run up was the first major bubble following the 2008 financial crisis. And I mean, that one, man, that's hard to take serious because here we have a president who campaigned. He didn't just say it was the stock market was a bubble. He campaigned crushing Hillary Clinton and anyone else who would listen, saying it was a bubble. And okay, if it's now the government's role to rein in these bubbles, how many times have we seen the stock market crash? We've seen the mortgage market crash. All these levels are higher. So what's your thought on that, on some of these other bubbles that they've acknowledged yet nothing, no action there?
Once again, it's not surprising. I mean, and Trump, that's been one of the most disappointing parts of his presidency, is the fact that in 2011 he very publicly denounced the dollar and said that the dollar was in trouble, and that it needed to change. And he actually, once again, very publicly rented one of his office spaces in New York City to a company, and gold was the payment. And there was, a video. You can go out on YouTube and find it
If I
of
can
him.
interrupt just one quick second, that's 40 Wall Street was actually the headquarters for our trading shop. So I would go there in the morning before going to the floor. I know that building well.
Yeah. So it's and they had a bullion shop there, I believe. I may be wrong about that, but I know that there were multiple kilo bars of gold that were part of the transaction, and that Trump is a huge gold fan, and that's why he interviewed Stephen Moore and that young lady Jane or Jan.
Judy Shelton.
Judy Shelton, thank you. Because they were both gold people, but yet he has the only gold that he has in the Treasury Department is a former Goldman Sachs scumbag, Stephen Mnuchin. I mean, and any of the people, gold is anti-dollar, period. And for Trump to recognize that, he knows that. He knows that. He knows that the dollar is a scheme and a scam. He knows that. That's the part that's very, very disappointing about what his reaction or response, the way that he has continued to rig the market. He's continued to use the Federal Reserve in an overtly criminal fashion, period. I mean, that is, for him to come out and basically tell Jerome Powell, cut the interest rate. He knows what that does. He knows that. That's what he campaigned on. He was calling Obama, calling him out for rigging the market for these low interest rates. Called him out for it. And now he's demanding it. And it's like, come on. You're supposed to be moving in the other direction. You're supposed to be calling for an audit. You're supposed to be on our side. And until the dollar is eliminated, until the Federal Reserve System is abolished, then we don't stand a chance, because their source of power is the Federal Reserve note, period. That is their source of power. And that is the reason that we are seeing nations around the world acquire gold, because gold is anti fiat currency, any fiat currency. It is money. And that's the reason that we're seeing these nations, excuse me, that's the reason that yesterday India announced that they were going to be developing their own financial messaging system that would be an alternative to the SWIFT system, and that it would be connected to both China and Russia's SWIFT alternatives. This is anti-dollar, period. The Russian financial services or financial messaging system, the SBSFS, is connected to the Iranian system, the CPAMs, SEPAM. They're already connected. They connected last month. China and Russia are working on connecting their systems, the CIPS out of China, CIPS, and now India announced that they're going to join. Now, you have all of this going on, and then you combine that with the fact that all of these physical gold platforms are opening up around the world, all in the Eastern world. You've got Dubai, you've got one that they're talking about in India, you got the BRICS gold exchange that's opening up in Beijing and Moscow. You've got the Moscow exchange now doing gold futures. You've got the Shanghai Gold Exchange doing gold futures and the world's largest physical gold market. You've got Japan that's opening up a physical gold market. So it's just in the UAE. That's where that's 6 new physical gold markets, gold platforms that are coming online or are already online. So somebody is sick of this system, this fiat dollar-based system, and they're doing something about it. And that's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. And the only way we can do that is by acquiring physical gold, physical silver, and keep it.
So that was part 1 of my interview with Rory. In part 2, he digs into some of the timeline. Maybe I shouldn't say timeline, but when he looks at some of these events that are happening now, whether we've actually reached that stage where life is beginning to change as we know it, and also goes into some of the supply and demand factors that are going on behind the scenes of this as well. So hit that subscribe button so you can be notified as soon as it occurs. One last final note before we wrap up today. New Orleans Investment Conference coming up this Friday, November 1st through the 4th. I will be there. I hope some of you can make it down. It's going to be a great conference. I'm going to be giving away silver, maybe even, here's my LBJ coin. I hear he was quite a character. I'm not sure if we'll give this one away or not yet, but we're going to find some fun people to give silver to, darn it. So if you're looking for a great place to go this week, come on down to the New Orleans Investment Conference. And with that said, again, thanks as always for watching, and we'll have part 2 for you tomorrow.